Hey, it's Bob Hastings of GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to dads about modern fatherhood. And if you've ever sat down with your child or put a child to bed and started telling a story, you may be interested in this next conversation we're going to have with Bob Hastings. Bob is an expert on storytelling and storytelling to kids with and without meanings. So welcome, Bob Hastings.
Thank you, Paul. It's a delight to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued with this because I bet like a lot of dads, I quite often lay down with my kids and I thought, oh wow, if I just had that perfect magical story that wasn't just, the Three Bears or something else.
Yes.
I wish I were Irish, or I wish I were, we came from some tradition of great storytelling. So
Yes.
do you think people are born to be storytellers, or do you think this is a skill?
Oh, that is a good question. Is it nature or nurture? For me, I found that it was something that I had innately, which I did not know. Really not having, training per se, but being accused as I was growing up of, well, you can tell a tall tale, and that was not a complimentary
Yeah.
observation. And the short backstory was, as a father with two kids, 3 years apart, my daughter was the older one, and I would do the reading of the storybooks and whatnot. And quite frankly, other than Winnie the Pooh and some of just the wonderful classics, still, I hear those stories in my own head.
Yeah, reading a story, yeah.
Right, but
That.
they're coming up with something, and I stumbled across a technique which they loved, and it was using their middle names for the characters in the story. So Catherine and Wood, which is a family name, so it's Katie and Woody became the characters in the stories that I would just literally make up as we were going to bed. And the technique that I wanted to do was to engage their imaginations and have them feel that they were in the story themselves,
Mm.
having whatever, adventure or misadventure. And that really resonated with them as kids.
Right. So when you talk about framework, was the framework mostly the use of the middle names, or was there some other type of
Ah,
story arc that you had in mind that you were going to follow? Or
uh,
I think that everybody's looking for the inspiration. How do you
right.
come up with a story? I mean, if I could make up great stories, I'd be a novelist instead of doing this.
Well, I mean, gosh, as I had to sort of find a template to do these things, the most basic one is the hero's journey of
Mm,
you have something that's settled in your life and then something happens.
right.
And what is that, a trauma, or is that an accident, something? And now you're on this quest to both find the answer, but in finding the answer, you also find something out about yourself. And
Classic
then the
trope.
resolution of the story is when you have reached this sort of insight, both on how to change a flashlight battery, or that you have these abilities that you were afraid to lean into, but through the story I can put in this case my kids as the characters into that voyage of discovery.
Okay.
And I think that's what it was for a father, a way to sort of very subtly, because, golly, who wants to be, you have to do it this way, and it just, you have to be preached to. And most kids will just shut that off, and blah, 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 like the Charlie Brown
Right.
narrative. But I found was that, I could put little seeds of things in there about, how to be kind or how to be polite, or just the values that you want your, small little kids to find and develop for themselves.
Yeah, the whole values thing is very important. Maybe we'll come back to that because I think that's so key. Is if you start with the idea of developing values with your kids, this is one way to transmit those values and reiterate those values. So, but when you sat down, did you have a story in
Uh,
mind, or did it kind of develop as you started saying, Katie and Woody go into the forest, and then what?
well, in all candor, I'm making these up. I'm telling these stories, and I really don't know, as a father, do they have any purpose, value? Are they being received until my son became a father?
Hmm.
And that's where the lights went off. And it was during COVID. We were having to do all the social distancing things, which just tears at your heart as a grandparent. You want to, pick up and, hug your grandson, and no, you have
Right.
to stay away 6 feet, all that stuff. So we're sitting out in this freezing, winter day in their backyard, finally granted an opportunity to meet, my then 3-year-old grandson and my son Drew, aka Woody. Hey, Dad, can you tell Arlo, that's my grandson's name, a story? And
Mhm.
I go, what do you, what? And I really kind of was taken aback by this. He goes, well, do you remember you would tell these stories when we were kids going to bed at night, Woody and Katie? And I go, oh, yeah. He goes, and you just made those up, didn't you? And I go, well, kind of, yeah. And he goes, can you make up another one? And Paul, to be put on the spot of, I've got to now, perform. I've got to, do something that's going to have, it was kind of as a grandparent, now I'm afraid. And that's where it hit me. Fear is such a present thing in all of our lives at all stages of growth, but especially, for a little one. And so the story became, oh, and I said, well, Drew, what are some things that, my audience, my grandson is interested in? And then here's the charming thing. He goes, he's really into wind. Well, there's a great non-specific.
Yeah.
And he likes crows. Okay, we're getting better. And pirates. So now I'm going to have a pirate story, and maybe the crow becomes a parrot and they're sailing in the wind. Okay, I got this. And in telling of the story of the naughty crow who takes somebody's hat away from them,
Mhm.
there's a lesson of, well, you have to ask for permission, but the parrot could do that and be naughty. Afterwards, my son gave me notes. So now we're acting like this is a theater production. And he goes, my wife and I are really trying to be very careful about crime and punishment. Oh, so what are you looking for rather than punishing the crow? He goes, maybe you could use that as a lesson so the crow learns not to, oh, now we're doing so in this simple little act, all of a sudden now I'm into this whole bit about, again, the teaching of value, but doing it also in being mindful of, well, the managers of the theater are my son and my daughter-in-law. The audience is my
Sure.
grandson. And I said, well, I can do that. And absolutely. So now I'm going from a spoken part to I've got to prepare. I got to write. I'm not a writer. At least I didn't think I had much skill at it. And so I wrote, rewrote that story that I had told. And I said, now would this be okay? So, and I sent it to, the managers of the theater, and they said, oh, that's perfect. So now I can come back and retell the story that I had written. And my son goes, Dad, that's just fantastic. He just loved it. And did you see the look on Arlo's face when you were telling that story in the cold afternoon of the backyard? I said, to be honest with you, I was struggling just to, do my storytelling, but my wife had taken a picture. And here's this faraway look of my grandson. And you can tell his imagination is
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
on engaged. And I go, well, I'm not patting myself on the back, but boy, as a storyteller, you want to see that your audience is not, looking off and, picking their nose or whatever. You want to know that they're really into what it is that you're trying to tell the story. So now I've got a couple of checks in the positive vein. One, I can make up something that the audience is interested in, but B, I can also engage, this 3-year-old in a way that meets them at the level that they are, rather than talking over them, or rather than, and I've seen this in a lot of the literature for little kids, it's like you're talking to a baby, and small kids their brains are developing, and they're not just this neutral thing. They've got a lot that they're bringing to the event.
Right.
And so off it went, and I ended up creating, I just finished the 3rd season of 13 stories. Why 13? Well, that's a baker's dozen. Okay. And then just by circumstance, and probably by others have experienced, I'm reading the story now to Katie, to the older daughter. I said, hey, I made up the story for, Arlo. What do you think of it? And I'm reading it thinking, well, maybe we'll create a little booklet or something, And she says, Dad, it's your voices. You've always
No,
had
you
these
need the voices. Yeah.
the goofy voices. You're always making up these funny voices, but now you put them in the story and it actually has merit.
So
So
I think what
yeah,
you touch on, something that I think probably all dads have, is that fear that you're not going to entertain your audience, even if they're 3 years old, or that the story doesn't have any. I mean, I can imagine the story about the parrot or the crow and the pirate. I can see them all on the ship very easily in my mind's eye, but I don't know how they come together and create any kind of classic story arc where there is some dramatic event and then a resolution. Where do they go? Where does that come to you in terms of them all coming together and it actually becoming a story rather than just a set piece?
So my training, my professional background, I'm an architect,
Okay, so you know how to
meaning
build.
I know how to create and how to structure things. So I just took that and laid it down on paper and said, I need to make a diagram of what is the story going to be, and then what are the pieces in that diagram? How does that look? And pretty basic on a 8.5, 11-inch piece of paper, but I had plot, I had message, I had key issues, and then I had what is the story, and that just became a template, and I used that all the way through for every story so I designed the whole 13 stories because I wanted to make sure that in telling a series that I wasn't being repetitive, or I wasn't being dogmatic, or those things that you want to
Preachy, yeah.
be preachy and you want to be a good dad, but you also have this is your chance. You can't blow it. You got to deliver.
Or are you
So
saying that even when your kids who are now parents were three themselves, you had a template, or did those stories happen organically? Did they come together organically?
they, as a parent, as a father with no training, it was just literally an organic thing. But in the back of my head, I've always had, I want to, if I'm going to tell a story, I want to do it like Winnie the Pooh,
Mhm.
like A. Milne,
Yeah.
where you follow just the story itself, what happens. And in the Winnie the Pooh stories, there's always the same thing. Everything is peaceful, and then it's not, and then there's struggle, and there's try, and then everybody has to come together to solve that problem. And at the end, we have resolution. So I guess intuitively, I knew that was just a simple template that I could use. And then now later on, I've used that again, but been a lot more intentional.
Mhm.
And as a dad, just to sort of share, now it's like I've got a framework, and it relieves the stress, the kind of anxiety that I don't know what the heck I'm doing, to now I know what I want to do. Can I do it? Can I deliver that? And I wish I had that training, that insight, with my own couple of kids, rather than just sort of blundering along and and making a lot of mistakes, quite frankly, of being preachy, of being long-winded, like I'm doing right now.
So
Okay.
do you think do you recommend to dads who maybe don't have that storytelling gene to learn other stories? I mean, I don't know if in your books, I mean, they're all those stories. Are those
Mm.
meant to be grist for the mill of a dad telling stories, retelling your stories?
I would love that. I mean, these are so simple, but until you state them, you kind of go, oh, right. And that is, what do you know? What do I know? What can I speak with some sense of knowledge and insight? And is there something that's, inherently interesting or valuable about that? It is to me, and I would hope it is to others. Well, fast forward, when we made these as a podcast, 13 audio stories, and we uploaded them on social platforms, and people can download them, they're free. And we found out that we had over 4,500 downloads for the first 26 stories. And these are like 10 minutes long.
Mhm.
And it was all over the world. And I was like, oh, of course, most of them are in my local vicinity, but to see that, somebody in Germany or Australia or China or, wherever, and there's multiple downloads because we have the statistics, as a validation, but also that I think there's a yearning, a desire, a need that's out there for being authentic or trying to be authentic, trying to meet kids where they are and put them in a place where they can recognize, oh, I'm worried about falling off my bike, or I'm really excited when I get an ice cream cone, or, the simple things of life and all the complexities that we have today. Those are still valid. They still resonate. And parents want their kids to hear these things. Maybe I hope the kids are asking, "Hey, I want to hear another one of the Bear King Bobo Chico stories for kids."
So those the stories that you've recorded are less than for teaching purposes for dads to take the stories, but to listen to your audio and your voices.
Right.
Right.
Right. I'm not instructing you on how to do it. If you listen to it and that resonates with you as a parent, I sure hope it does. I
How long
think
do you think the storytelling age lasts? If they, I mean, I think, I guess, you know, maybe as early as two, so you start singing them songs, or earlier
right.
than that, you start singing them songs,
Yeah.
and at some point you're going to put books in their hands and be actually telling them stories. And then it gets to some age, and because I've had the unfortunate experience of trying to tell like an 8 or 9 year old a
Right.
scary, what I thought was going to be a scary story, and at the end they just gave me this blank look, like, good try, but that's not, that's not really exciting. I think it's easier to do it when they're three, right, than when they get a little bit older and a little bit more knowledgeable.
And they certainly have, as they get older and more aware of the world and aware of other things, that that's where they want to, they always want to sort of make that leap of, I can do this by myself. I'm creating my own independence. I don't need you, until I do. And then, boy, I really need you. So for me, I'm shooting, 3 years old. I know it works there,
Yeah,
maybe even a
right,
little
right.
younger. How far depends. I think if it gets to 8, I'm delighted that an 8-year-old be listening. If it gets to 10 years old, I would be amazed. But I will share with you, because I think part of the power of what I've tapped into is the we have a sense of innocence, and as little kids, and wanting to learn things, and we want somebody to be there to help us, if it's holding the bicycle seat as you're learning to ride your bike, to recognizing I have to step back and let them move into a place of mistakes and learning, be there to, put the band-aid on if desired, knowing that there's also going to be that request. Hey, I'm going to need some money for. Well, okay, well, that's a whole nother podcast that you'll have with somebody of children learning how to manage money. But again, going back to Winnie the Pooh, the very last story that A. Milne wrote, and I just weep again with joy and emotion. The parting of Christopher Robin saying, "Pooh, I'm going, and I can't take you with me. I have to leave you here in the 10-acre wood, but I'm going to go there. I will always be your friend." And we have this thing called a memory. And those memories are so important to all of us, especially to kids and children. Sometimes we think we're creating them for them, but they're the ones who decide what they're going to, hang on to and remember.
Sure.
So when they say, I don't want to listen to that anymore, then that's their choice.
Uh-huh. So if you find that you're not able to come up with great stories,
Mm.
do you have recommendations of where people can find? I mean, you got your series,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is there a download? Is there a link that we should put in the show notes for people to download your
Yes,
podcast?
thank you. It's Bear King and Bobo Chico stories for kids. And
Okay.
it's available on all the, Apple and Google and,
Okay, we'll
all the
make sure to
different.
put those in the show notes so
Yeah.
people get a taste of.
I think, and that's such a great question. What are the stories that a father would be capable and have some authenticity about sharing, or making up that story? Jimmy Buffett, rest his soul, had a wonderful song about the captain and the kid. And it was a story about his grandfathers telling him stories of what he did in his life.
Mhm.
And the little boy wanted to hear these stories from the person who actually had lived them. Now, granddad may be stretching the truth on some of these things, but as a writer, that's always your license to do that. But I think it was when I that song, hits me, it's about, if you've had an authentic experience, and you can find a way to put that in not in again in a lecture, but as a remembrance, then you're speaking from fact. You know what you're talking about. You're speaking about what it is. Now the trick is, and this is, I'll use the bike analogy again. Hey, Dad, can you deliver that story in a way that your audience is going to find it enjoyable? And as an architect, you learn by your mistakes. Don't worry about failure. keep at it, keep, working it. And if they don't like it the first one, just like my grandson or my son didn't, get that little feedback and then, keep trying and going forward.
Do you think the biggest element was maybe at the 3-year-old stage is less the story than setting up the elements and creating the visual picture rather than the classic story arc that they may require at 7 or 8?
Good question. Very good question. I believe a simple template, however, the person wants to conceive of that in their own head, but what the words that you're going to, pop out of your mouth and it's going to land in their ear, what is it that they will be attracted to, drawn to? I was, again, I was repulsed by the sort of baby talk, sort of goofy little,
Yeah, right.
simplistic stuff that, and I thought, you know, I don't want my grandson to be, doing that kind of, I want to challenge their mental acuity a
Vocabulary.
little bit. And I found that by drawing them in, then I also would get, this is the best part. Oh, now I get questions. Hey, and my nickname is Bear King. So, hey, Bear King, what was that? Or you used a word here. What did that mean? Well, that became part of the storytelling. Constellations. Bear King, what's a consternation? No, constellation. That's a group of stars. So then you turn from being a big-headed, preachy person into just unpacking something that their curiosity is now drawn into. They want to find out something. And that's the trick. If they come at you with, tell me more about that, now your audience is following along and they're intrigued and they're interested. And then you can also ask them, well, and this is actually what happened. Hey, Arlo, what ideas should I put in the stories? What were you interested about? And now I'm
Right
getting
now you're
notes.
co-writing. Yeah.
Now yes, exactly. So that led to in this last season 3, we talked about robots. We talked about rattlesnakes. We talked about Native Americans and where they're from and that they're still here. Just all sorts of those are complex, sophisticated things
Right.
that now a 6-year-old is really wants to learn about. So you have to listen and see, pay attention to what your audience is doing and if they're following along. And if you've lost them and they're off doing something else, well, take that as a cue and okay, they really weren't interested in Russian
Yep.
literature.
Know
Got it.
yeah, know your client and write
Yeah.
down notes. A lot of us read books, I guess, because we're afraid. What do you think the relationship is in you telling the story to them versus you reading a book or story together? I guess within that there is that opportunity to discuss the story, take little paths off the trail and embellish it because they can't read yet. You can say whatever you want with the pictures on the story. I mean, you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
pick up a Dr. Seuss and tell a different story every time. You might not get the rhyme right, but
Well, and that's where you're right. Children also, especially young children, their sense of safety, their sense of belonging, of being nurtured, all those good things that we want them to feel. It's a bit of repetition. They like the familiar.
hmm,
So, and then they become really knowledgeable about it. And if you deviate
right,
from
right, yeah,
something
that's true.
that's expected, you better know why you're making that deviation. Maybe you're doing it to sort of catch them. Oh, did I say that wrong? What I meant to say was this. Again, that's another little trick where that they're paying attention and that they're intrigued by what's being talked about. Again, when with my grandson, we would sit down with a piece of paper and let's just start doodling some things.
Hmm,
And he was just playing. But as you know, when they're playing with something that they're manipulating, be it Legos or a drawing, that's their brain connecting and they're trying to express something. They're trying to unpack something. That's gold. That's diamonds. The best thing you can look at. What's that? Who is that? Does that, oh, it's a sea creature. Boy, you could have
what is he
fooled
doing?
me. Oh, what would the name of that sea creature be? And we do this when we're just playing, when I get now the opportunity past COVID, and we'll play with Legos and we'll be making up things. Now I'm paying attention to what he's giving me as story fodder. And then I come back and I said, hey, Arlo, we're talking about, that the crows and the birds and such. Well, here's a story that about that. Do you want to hear that? His first question is, what's the crow's name? Oh God, now I got to come up with a name for the crow. Okay.
So what do you think about using biblical stories or legends or fairy tales,
Yes,
retelling
yes,
those? I mean, maybe that's an entry point for a lot of dads to
yes,
start telling the stories if they
yes.
don't have a particular, they're not blessed with your gift of, of creation.
But they're wonderful universal themes.
Mhm.
Daniel in the lion's den, any biblical story, regardless of
Right,
where
right.
I'm coming from, my own faith journey and all that kind of stuff. So in season 2, I used the Odyssey.
Oh,
Ooh, Homer.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Those are
uh,
fascinating tales. The ogre, the one-eyed ogre, and the cyclops,
so yeah,
Grizzly,
and they went
Byron.
on a hero's journey. They left home, and
Yeah,
everything was about trying to get back home. I
right.
want to get back home, but I'm going to meet these fantastic things on the journey. And in that, the conclusion of it was Thomas Hardy's line, "You can never go home again,"
Mhm.
meaning once you've been through that journey, you may have returned to the physical place, but you're not the same person when you left, which is again a wonderful message and a device in storytelling for kids. How can they participate in the transformation of their own making a good one?
Yeah,
Hopefully not too scary, but kids also like, grotesque things and,
yeah,
stuff
gross
that,
things. Oh, yeah.
yeah. So you,
Right.
you, you can't, even boys and girls, it's, again, know your audience.
Yeah.
But yes, I
Well,
like that using the templates of great literature, biblical stories, whatever that device is, because that they've been vetted and tested
yeah, right.
already.
For a little extra confidence. Well, I hope this has been an inspiring talk for dads out there. Because I mean, one of the biggest things is to spend time with your kids and figure out ways to not do that passively, try to do that actively, where you're actually getting involved, you're having a conversation, you're setting up something deeper than just watching TV together. And it's a beautiful way to do that. I'm very impressed with your dedication to doing this, both with your kids and with your grandkids. I'm not going to attempt to repeat the URL for your your
Oh,
podcast, but we'll put that in the show notes so that people can find it. Bob, I thank you for spending time with us today.
thanks, Paul. Take
Okay.
care.
Okay. Paul Bass at GreatDad.com. Until next time, take care.